Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. We talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm Roche Jeffrey, and subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our video. There aren't any top 10 matchups in college basketball this Saturday like there were last week, but this matchup right here is basically a top 10 matchup because you got the Baylor Bears, who are playing like a top 10 team right now, ranked at number 13, traveling on the road to face number 4 ranked Kansas at Phog Allen Fieldhouse. I'm going to preview and predict whether I believe that Baylor can go on the road and knock off the Kansas Jayhawks at Phog Allen, something that they do struggle to do, or whether I believe that Kansas will continue to defend their home court. Despite some of the road struggles this year, Kansas is still doing well at home, get a win over Baylor, and help their chances of possibly staying in the Big 12 title race. So let's get into it. The Baylor Bears, they are 17-5 and they're 6-3 in the Big 12. And Scott Drew, he has done a fantastic job as the Baylor head coach because when he took over the program around 20 years ago, they were one of the worst college basketball programs in the country, but now they are one of the best programs in the Big 12. He's gotten them to win a national title. It's unbelievable what a job he's done in the toughest conference in college basketball. Look at this conference. My goodness, how many good teams that there are. You've got Houston at the top at 7-3 in the Big 12, and then you've got Baylor right behind at 6-3. Kansas is 6-4. The Jayhawks have dominated the Big 12 in the last 15 to 20 years with Bill Self at head coach, but this season they are a game back. They still have a shot to win the conference, but getting a win over Baylor would significantly help, and these two teams do play each other later in the year, with Kansas having to go on the road to face Baylor, so it would do Kansas a lot of good if they could win this game at home, but the Big 12 winner might have 6 losses. Houston, Baylor, Kansas, whichever one of these teams ends up winning the Big 12 this season, they probably will have 5 or 6 losses in conference play. That's how good this conference is. If you like watching SEC or ACC basketball, I don't blame you, but you've got to check out some Big 12 basketball because this is definitely the premier conference in the country. Look how many teams are in the NCAA tournament field. The only teams that are really not in the tournament field right now are West Virginia, Oklahoma State, and UCF is on the outside of most bracketologists' projections, but every other team is currently in the tournament field. That is how deep this conference is. And they do give the Kansas Jayhawks a 67% chance to win this game to Baylor's 33% chance. And when you look at what these two teams have done in their last 5 games, the Kansas Jayhawks have just lost on the road at their rival, the Kansas State Wildcats. That's a game that I think a lot of people believe that Kansas would be able to win because Kansas State had lost 4 of their last 5 games, but that shows you how tough the Big 12 is when Kansas, a team toward the top of the Big 12, goes on the road to face their rival who's really struggling in conference play, but Kansas State's still a good team. It's just the gauntlet of the Big 12 can get to you, and sometimes you lose back-to-back games, but then finally you figure it out. But Kansas has beaten Houston, Oklahoma State, and Cincinnati in their last few games. They lost at Iowa State, which is a very tough environment, and they're a really good team this year toward the top of the Big 12 standings. But then looking over at Baylor, the Bears, they got wins over Texas Tech. Iowa State, that Iowa State game was absolutely unreal. Scott Drew got ejected for the first time in his 20-year tenure as the Baylor head coach. That was an unbelievable game. How many foul calls there were against Baylor on their own floor, and Scott Drew absolutely lost it. But Baylor stayed composed, and they were able to win that game. And they beat UCF on the road, but then they lost to TCU on their own floor in triple overtime, which is absolutely insane. And they lost at the Texas Longhorns, which Texas is a team that's not playing too bad this season, even though they've had some ups and downs. And if you look in the non-conference for both these teams, Baylor has wins over Auburn, Florida, and Seton Hall, and Kansas has wins over Kentucky, Tennessee, UConn, and Indiana. So even though Baylor does have a better record than Kansas right now, the Jayhawks have played a bit more of a tough schedule, and Baylor this season is averaging 84 points per game, and they're giving up 71 points per game, and Kansas is scoring 79 points per game, and they're giving up 68 points per game. So Kansas's defense is a little bit better than Baylor's. Baylor's offense has been more explosive, but like I said, Kansas's schedule was a bit tougher, so that's probably contributed to why they are scoring a little bit less this season. And when you look at Baylor's roster, they have a very deep team. They're kind of like the diet version of the Auburn Tigers. Auburn has one of the deepest teams in college basketball because they can go 10 deep with so many guys off the bench being able to contribute. And this Baylor team has a lot of bench guys that do contribute for this team at a high level. Jakobe Walter is the best scorer on the team by a slim margin, averaging 14 points per game and 5 boards. But Ray J. Dennis is right behind, averaging close to 14 points per game, and he's by far the best passer on the team with 6 assists per game. Langston Love, Jalen Bridges, and Yves Missy all average over 10 points per game. And then it goes from there with Caleb Launer, Myro Little, who was a highly rated guy, and he hasn't even had much of an impact this season. Jonathan Chama Chachu, it's tough for him that he just can't stay healthy. He's been an energetic player for Baylor in the past, but he's not getting into the rotation much this season. But like I said, Baylor, their offense averaging 84 points per game. They shoot 40% from 3 and 73% at the line, which are very solid numbers. Baylor's going to have to shoot the ball well from the three-point line if they are going to get a win at Phog Allen, and they're going to have to knock down their free throws at a high rate when they are given the chance at the line in the game. And they average 16 assists per game and 11 turnovers, so they are a bit turnover prone, which does not help when you are on the road, but still they do take care of the ball well enough. And then when you look at Bill Self's squad, Kevin McCullough and Hunter Dickinson are by far the two best players for the Kansas Jayhawks. Kansas is kind of like the inverse of Baylor, where Baylor doesn't really have a go-to guy, but they have a lot of depth. Kansas, they've got two go-to guys, and then everybody else kind of chips in. Hunter Dickinson averaging a double-double with 19 points and 11 boards, and Kevin McCullough is probably the most all-around player in college basketball with his defense. He's good at getting steals. He's good at getting some blocks, but he's also a great rebounder, a great passer for a guy that's 6'7", and he can score the basketball at a rate that he's never scored in college basketball before, so it's going to be tough for Baylor to slow him down. KJ Adams is averaging 12 points per game and 5 boards and 4 assists, so he's pretty all around as well, even though he doesn't score as much as Kevin McCullough. But then there's a big drop-off. Johnny Furphy is coming on, though, for Kansas, and that's what's making it tougher to beat the Jayhawks recently. Yes, Kansas State got it done, but that's a rivalry game, and it was at Kansas State. This game's at home, so Baylor's going to have to find a way to limit Johnny Furphy's ability and kind of contain the rest of the team, because Kevin McCullough and Hunter Dickinson, they're going to get their points. And then you got DeJuan Harris, who's also great at passing like Kevin McCullough, averaging 7 points per game and 7 assists. He's one of the best passing point guards in college basketball. Elmarco Jackson, Nicholas Timberlake, and Parker Brown do not score that much, but they do contribute to the rotation. Kansas does average fewer points than Baylor, like I said, but they have had a tough schedule. They do shoot 36% from 3, 74% at the line, so their three-point shooting percentage is worse than Baylor, but their free throw shooting percentage is better. And they average 21 assists per game and around 12 turnovers, so they do turn the ball over just as much as Baylor, but they assist the ball so well. They're one of the best in college basketball that when you pass the ball that much, turnovers are going to happen, so that is excusable. Both these teams are in great shape for the NCAA tournament. Baylor's a 3 seed, Kansas is a 2 seed, and Kansas is number 12 in the net, and Baylor is at number 14. Both teams have a lot of wins over Quad 1 and Quad 2, which is helping out both teams' NCAA tournament resumes. And when you look at the series history, when Scott Drew first took over back in the early 2000s, they could not win a game versus Kansas. They finally beat the Jayhawks in the 2008-2009 season, and then they started to win a little bit more frequently. And then finally, Baylor won at Kansas in the 2019-2020 season. But then after that, Baylor has not beaten Kansas on the road since. They have been able to win at home, but that's what's going to make this tough. Baylor under Scott Drew has not been able to win at Phog Allen Fieldhouse except one time, so this would only be the second time it's ever happened. And Scott Drew's done a fantastic job as the Baylor head coach, but that is how tough it is to win at the Kansas Jayhawks. They have a great environment, and it is very tough for things to go your way sometimes when you are on the road in such a tough environment, playing a team with Bill Self, a head coach that is always good. And I would say that people talk about Roy Williams, Mike Krzyzewski, Bob Knight, Gene Cady, and a lot of other examples of classic coach rivalries. Scott Drew versus Bill Self is getting up there as one of the best coaching rivalries in college basketball, because both these teams have had their coaches now for about 2 decades, and they have had some classic battles, especially the last 8 to 10 years. But who do I believe is going to win this massive Big 12 matchup on Saturday at 6 o'clock on ESPN? The Baylor Bears. I think that they are a fantastic team. They're fighting through adversity this season in a very tough Big 12 conference. That Iowa State game, like I said, was absolutely unreal. Scott Drew, he did lose his composure, but he is a very composed coach. I'm sure he will keep it together at the Kansas Jayhawks. Baylor shoots the ball well at the free throw line, which is going to help them in a road environment. They shoot over 40% from 3, which is going to be tough for Kansas to be able to slow down all the guys that Baylor has that can score. And I think that is the possible chance that Baylor has to win this game. If they can get 6 or 7 of their guys going all at the same time in this game, game. Baylor might be able to outscore the Kansas Jayhawks, but Baylor is going to have a tough time limiting Kevin McCullough and Hunter Dickinson. But if Johnny Furphy and KJ Adams can help chip in as well, and if Kansas can get any contributions from their other players, then the Jayhawks being at home with that tough environment and the fact that they do have a really good free throw shooting team as well, and they shoot well enough at the three-point line, I'm going to go with the Kansas Jayhawks to beat the Baylor Bears 78-74. I really like Scott Drew as a head coach, and I believe that he's got this Baylor team consistently rolling. There's been no drop-off barely from the national championship winning team back in 2021. Maybe they haven't been as good since that season, but they still have a fantastic team. Jakobe Walter, Ray J. Dennis, Yves Missy. They got some really good players, and I believe that they're all going to chip in to get Baylor very close to a victory at Kansas, which would only be their second win at Phog Allen under Scott Drew, but I do believe Kansas just has too much talent at the top and that their home environment is going to be enough to tilt this game in the Kansas Jayhawks' favor with a slight 78-74 win. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below, whether you think that Scott Drew can get Baylor's second win at Phog Allen Fieldhouse, or whether you think that Bill Self can get his Kansas Jayhawks team a massive win over the Baylor Bears at home that would keep them in the Big 12 title race. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Follow me on Twitter as well. Link is in the description, and I'll see you next time.